I I do speak quite, I do talk very fast. So if you have a question or you didn't quite get what I was saying, go ahead and either pop it in the chat or raise your hand, and I can review what I had just, said. So that's the only thing. I just wanted to put that out there, that I do speak a little bit quickly. I've been in escrow for over 25 years. I've seen it all, and I shouldn't say I've seen it all, because every day in this industry, something new always pops up. I run a title desk for a couple of years, and so I've kind of had, dabbled into various departments in our industry. So today we are going to go over transaction nightmares. Jennifer says that I've had a few. I like to pride myself that it was due to the environment, not me. So I actually have had a few transaction nightmares. Just everyone knows in this industry, there's nothing that, absolutely nothing you can't prevent. You can prepare, but things happen. So hopefully today you will hear maybe some scenarios, and if it does come across your desk due to this class, you'll know how, maybe to prepare yourself for it. So Jen, I see dead people. So in this case, in this scenario, if the seller you are meeting does not match the name on the current deed, ask them how they acquired ownership. You have to remember the general public they don't understand our industry. They don't obviously they do not understand title and escrow, because for whatever reason we're very, very foreign to the general public. So in their eyes, if there could be various ways that they acquired ownership, you just have to get them to explain to you how in detail. If only one of several owners on title are present at the listing appointment, again, ask about the status of the other owners. One owner can't solely sell the property on their own. Everyone on title has to, in some form, some way, be involved in the transaction. I've had situations where there are various brothers and sisters on title, and certain siblings just didn't want anything to do with the transaction, which is fine. They weren't objecting to the transaction, they just didn't want anything to do with it. And I've had, in that scenario, they deeded off the property and allowed the other siblings to move forward on the transaction. There are other times where we get a pre-open. Agents this day and age, it's a very good practice to have. And what a pre-open means is they pre-order a preliminary title report to kind of get an idea and a heads up of what the property entails, like who actually owns the property, what kind of hurdles that we may or may not have. And so that's where you may or may not see some dead people on title. If you met with one seller and you didn't pull a vesting deed, but we pre-opened and the preliminary title report comes in with several names and you only met with one person, that's when you're going to ask that question, who is John Smith? He is currently on title. And if they said, oh, I'm sorry, he's passed away, there's some questions that need to be asked depending on how they held title. If they hold title as joint tenants, there's not a whole lot of questions. So when is it straightforward? No probate required. Just dropped the joint tenancy verbiage a few seconds ago. Joint tenants is if a property is vested in a joint tenancy, can be anyone. So you do not have to be married in order to hold title as joint tenancy. The deceased interest is automatically granted to the remaining joint tenants. For example, Anna Gettman and Robin Albert, or Anna Gettman, a married woman, as her sole and separate property, Robin Albert, a married woman, as her sole and separate property, as joint tenants. If something should happen to either one of us, God forbid, knock on wood, whoever has passed, the other individual will inherit that person's half. So something should happen to me, Robin gets my portion, and now she owns the property solely 100%. Now, if we hadn't, held it as joint tenants, just as a married woman sold separate with no joint tenancy vesting, there's issues. Okay. Can I get the next bullet, please? Okay. Community property with right of survivorship is equivalent to joint tenancy. An affidavit of death will be prepared and recorded with other transfer documents. A lot of people, they choose this one over joint tenancy due to their tax status. We do not go into people's tax status. We do not advise them how to take joint tenancy. We do not advise them how to take vesting. We provide them various ways to vest, but we don't advise that they should be vested in joint tenancy or they should be vested in community property with right of survivorship and so on and so forth. We have a great handout that explains each vesting. If you are interested in having that handout, reach out to your assigned sales representative and they will be able to get you that great handout. But with community property, with right of survivorship, it basically the same thing as joint tenancy. If one, something should happen to one and the other, the remaining person gets the property in its entirety without going through probate. The community property has something, people take that due to their tax status, and that is a case by case and situational for each individual. Okay. Revocable transfer on death deed of record. This is it's fairly new, not too new, but it's fairly new. And it does come with a little bit of a laundry basket, meaning that we do accept those, but there is some various items that we need along with it. We're going to need an affidavit of grantor, or if the person, if you are in a transaction where the person has recorded a revocable transfer on death deed, but they're still alive and now they're selling the house before they died, they're going to need to revoke it back. And so that also is a document that's going to be necessary. But there is a waiting period after the date of death. There is 120-day waiting period. So even though you don't have to go through probate in this scenario, there is a waiting period. Okay. There is also no probate for a trust. There is a little bit of a caveat, and I'm going to explain it. Just reason why I'm teaching this class is I do have nightmares, and I have a current one right now where property's in a trust, but we have to go through probate, and I will get into that in a half a second here. But trust is a non-court way of distributing assets of a decedent, which are on title in the name of the trust. So typically, if you pull title and there is a trust that's vested, and someone has passed, you are not going to have to go through probate. However, your client will have to provide a copy of the trust so the title department can review it and see who is actually an authorized successor trustee and who is authorized to sign all of the documentation within the transaction. So just take a little note that you might want to just have something in the back of your mind to remind your clients that the title company will be asking for a copy of their trust. Now, it's a very private document because there's lots of information in the trust that has really nothing to do with us or the transaction, and is really none of our business. So you're gonna remind your clients that we don't need the entire trust. We just need the section where it talks about who has the powers, or who's the trustees, and who are the successor trustees, and the signature and notarization page. So it's usually the first 5 to 10 pages, and then the last page. We don't need the middle portion of it because it talks a lot about other private stuff that really is none of our business and we don't need. So in regards to a trust and a property being in a trust and not having to go through probate, I actually have a situation to date I'm dealing with, and I just got notification. We've been dealing with it for quite some time, the last 2 weeks. I have a transaction right now where the successor trustee, the trustee has passed, the property's in the trust, and the successor trustee has authorization to sign, so on and so forth. But before she went into a listing agreement with the agent, she took it upon herself to go back to an attorney and have the attorney draw up a deed from the trust to herself. She is named in trust as a beneficiary, but there's also other things in the trust, that other assets and other things, that there's lots of things that are talked about in the trust. And what she has done is she has done a self-serving deed, because there's other beneficiaries for other things, and it's really not very clear on that she's to get the property 100%. But because she has done this before, before anybody had a chance to say, no, that's not a good idea, she did a self-serving deed. Now we have to go back through the attorney that drew the trust and did the self-serving deed, which is a little bit confusing to us, that is. They have to go back, or the attorney has to go to the court, ask for a hearing, and it's called a Hegstag order, and it's not a full-blown trust. I'm sorry, it's not a full-blown probate. It's like a 60-day process, but basically that attorney is going to the court and saying, okay, we did this thinking that we were doing the right thing, but this successor trustee is the beneficiary of the property, but the self-serving deed clouded the situation. But the original trustee had the intent to give the property to the successor trustee. So having said that, even though you think trust means no probate, there are nightmares that can happen every so often, and it's on a case-by-case basis and situational. So there goes that, and there you have that. Okay. Is there a will? Intestate. I'm tongue-tied this morning. If someone dies without a will, they are intestate. Before any property transfers can take place, a thorough search for potential heirs must be conducted. It is important to note that the probate is still required even if there's a will. Side note. Okay. Testate, the will creates a state that names their heirs and makes the path in probate clear. It gives you a blueprint for the distribution of estate. Now, that word I said earlier in the previous slide, the Hegstag order, if you want to have a property be sold and there is a intent, it has been known that the court will issue a Hegstag order off of a will. If the property wasn't in a trust, it has been known that they will issue a Hegstag order off of a will to an individual, that so you don't have to go, or you don't have to wait for a full probate or go through go through just the probate for the property. The court reviews wills and will accept a will in that case. But again, it's situational and case by case. Okay. So if your grandma or your aunt or your good neighbor writes a letter and says, I want to leave my property to James Dean, my grandson, my nephew, my awesome neighbor, that's not a will. Sorry. A will is a actual legal ceremonial document, and a letter is not. So will does hold some kind of water, just not with us. Missing persons. Everyone who is on title must agree to transfer and sign a deed transferring their interest in the property. And this is super important because you have, like I mentioned earlier, siblings that are maybe all on title, and one just steadfast and heels dug in and just doesn't want to sell the property for whatever reason. They have to agree to sell the property unless they agree to deed off the property. Or you have a ton of siblings and one of them can't be found, which we had to go down some rabbit holes to try to find somebody. And it unfortunately, it was a brother that was just pretty much living on the streets, had a rough life, and there was no way to find him. And there was no way to find him through the course of the escrow. And it actually came back about 6 months later. Somebody did end up locating him, came across, and it created another problem because he was, I don't know, there is a new word. I'm sorry if I don't want to be offensive, but because he was homeless and he was living on the streets, and he was just very not aware of what was going on. That caused us, even though he was located, it caused us the problem because he wasn't of sound mind to know exactly what the transaction entailed and what it was, what was going to be rolling out. So you can have a situation, it could get resolved, and it can turn into a whole nother issue. Okay. If someone on title has disappeared, just like I had mentioned, they must be located and sign the deed. So if they are located and they don't want to sign the deed, there's various things that you can do. There can be there can be a conservatorship. If the person can never be located, it's similar to going through probate type situation, where you go to the courts and you provide them evidence and documentation that there was a honest attempt to locate the person, and they were unlocatable, and so the court would then issue an order to award the property to the individual that was looking for the person or was on title together with them. And so there is, where there's a will, no pun intended, there is a way. There's just, you have to ask a lot of questions to figure out a path to your finish line. And then we must take into consideration with the uninsured deed as well. So if somebody signed a deed within the last couple of years, an uninsured deed, meaning they signed a deed outside of title and escrow to deed their portion of the property to someone, we have an uninsured deed affidavit that is required. And when I say we, I mean all title and escrow companies, not just Chicago Title. That is required for that individual to sign the affidavit saying that they did intend to sign the deed and transfer their interest, and that they were aware of what they were signing, and that, of course, they were of sound mind. And if that deed was signed a year ago and now you can't find the person, it's just because they signed it already doesn't mean that you're out of the woods. That uninsured deed affidavit must be executed in order for any title company to move forward on the transaction.
Anna, we had a quick question on the missing person search. How long do we need to look for that missing person? What do you know what the court requirements are?
I do not know what the court requirements require, because I think it all depends on the situation of the missing person. If it's just a spouse that you can't find and no missing persons report was ever filed, or that person is actually missing, it's all situational. And I think it's up to the courts of when they would feel it would be sufficient enough to issue the court order to award the property to another individual. If they cannot be located, you will be required to do quiet title. A quiet title is a way to move forward. It does take a little bit of time. It does require some court action, and that process can be up to 2 years. Okay, and real estate attorney is the person that conducts this process of quiet title. Okay. If a power of attorney is going to be used for any reason, certain guidelines, criteria must be met. So if you're doing a power of attorney for a person that's incapacitated for health reasons, a power of attorney is going to, first of all, if you present a power of attorney, title will ask what is the reason, and if the reason is that due to an illness, for whatever the case may be, 2 doctor's notes are required to support the fact that they are unable or incapacitated to move forward, to represent themselves in the transaction. If your client will be out of the country at the time of signing. You just never know in this day and age and the way our world operates now, where I'm surprised on some of the locations that people actually travel to, and because not every place that people travel to is a U.S. embassy or U.S. consulate is accessible or even near in location wise, because if you have a client that is traveling or will be out of the country during our transaction, it's super important that, number one, hopefully they have told you. Number two, if you have that information, that you've shared it with title and escrow, because it's not that easy. Yes, you can go to a U.S. consulate and U.S. embassy to use their I can't speak, notary service. But those appointments are typically minimum 30 days out. So your client would have to go online, go to the nearest embassy. I've had where the nearest embassy was 4 hours away one way for somebody outside of the country. And the appointment was at least 30 days out. So it is very important, if you have this information, start making plans, start understanding the location where they're at, because it's not just how we can just drive 10 minutes downtown Fresno or just around the corner. We have the Mexican consulate here. Like, it's not that. In other places it's a trek, it's a drive, it's so let's just be prepared. If you have that information, give it up and let's figure it out. If a client is in prison, it's not unusual. We have clients that the spouse either wants to buy a property or is selling their property, and of course the spouse that's in prison has to take part in signing the documentation. So it can be done, and we have done it quite a lot. And so an appointment has to be made. The prisoner has to get permission for a notary to go in. The notary has to be, for the lack of better words, like vetted, because they can't just have anybody, just any notary go in. And so it's a process. And and with anything, it does take time. We submit what we want. The prisoner does confirm. Then they, depending on the institution, they say, okay, they can come in, 2 weeks from now at 10 a.m. and that you can't switch up notaries. It has to be that specific notary. They go in, they sign, and they come out. It's a very intricate process, but it is something that does take time. So if you do have a client that in some way or form that they somebody that's involved is in prison, it's something that we have to know right away, because it's not a fast process. Okay. If a client becomes incapacitated, just like I said earlier, a power of attorney, 2 doctor's notes. If they're incapacitated in another way, conservatorship is a pathway that your clients can go down to successfully close the transaction. Again, if a power of attorney is going to be used for any reason, certain guidelines must be met. If somebody died and you have a power of attorney, that power of attorney is dead. It doesn't, the power of attorney dies when the principal dies. It doesn't, you can't just like, oh, I have power of attorney to sell the property for my aunt. When did she die? Last month. Well, no, you don't have power of attorney. So zombie deeds of trust. These happen on a weekly basis. I have one right now. It just seems like they're always lurking around the corner. The beneficiary must be located on every open deed of trust, no matter how old. For whatever reason, the 80s were very popular for now defunct financial institutions. So if there is another reason why we like our agents to pre-open an escrow, meaning order a prelim before, it's after they get a listing agreement signed, but before an offer comes in, just to kind of, you know, see what is affecting the property. And this is where these things can come up, and we have at least a chance, you know, to get ahead of it and start working on these. Like I said, there are defunct institutions, and then another zombie deeds of trust are private beneficiaries. So for example, I lend money to my cousin to buy a house, and we record a deed of trust, and something happens to me and I've passed, but I'm the only beneficiary on that deed of trust. The title and escrow will have to look for my heirs to rectify that open deed of trust. So what ends up happening is with the help of the agent and the client, title and escrow does assist in locating all beneficiaries, all heirs of a beneficiary if the beneficiary has passed. Same thing with defunct institutions. Like for whatever reason, the 80s had all these financial institutions that are no longer in business to date. But we've had where other financial institutions have picked up their portfolios 2 or 3 times after the fact. And so we are going down the rabbit hole looking at if anybody can assist us on obtaining a full reconveyance. So in these 2 situations, if we have done all our due diligence and we've gone down both rabbit holes and just come up empty, where you're not dead in the water, you may have a zombie deed of trust, but you're not dead in the water. You will start the process of what is called a loss note bond. And both situations, it is required. So what this does, it'll help you close your transaction. However, it's not an overnight process. You have to put in an application with an insurance company, not a title insurance company, an actual an insurance company, i.e. Debudo and Offendes or any of those kind of insurance companies. You have to apply for a loss note bond, put in an application. They do have requirements. They collect financials. They collect a lot of information on the old deed of trust. And if approved, they would go ahead and issue a loss note bond. The price is above and beyond your normal title and escrow fees. This fee is collected from the title insurance the title company. The insurance company directly. And it's typically 1.5% of the face value of the original deed of trust. That's an estimate of fees that they charge. Now, this process does take approximately 45 days. Take note, this 45-day time frame is on top of your normal escrow time frame. Reason being is there's a 30-day waiting period after the application is approved that we have to send out notifications via certified mail. And if we do not get any contact with it, at the 31st by the 31st day, then we can move on with our escrow transaction. And the reason why I say approximately 45 days is because there's that 2-week window where you're submitting the application and the application is being reviewed. If the insurance company is going to request additional documentation. So that's why I say there's about a 45-day time frame on top of that. Okay.
So Anna, we have a couple of things in the chat, just really fast. Art Servin said that he had a client who someone took over the deed, changed the name on the deed, and the client was not aware until they received a letter from the person out of state. I would guess that that's an uninsured deed and we would go back to the original deed holder, but do you have a thought on that?
That's exactly what would happen. We would revert back to the original vesting until we can get an uninsured deed executed by that individual that signed that deed over.
And then I think you addressed this, but Lily Gutierrez was just asking, what is our process for looking for those beneficiaries? Do we have a service we use? Do we hit Google? What do we do?
We just start, we search our internal database. We'll plug in a name to see if they had ever had a transaction with our company, because you'd be surprised that, we deal with a lot of people, throughout the years, transaction after transaction. So we start there, and we've had luck before to go down a little bit rabbit hole. If nothing comes up, then we hit Google, and we hit, unfortunately, we type their names into obituary sites, because those obituaries do give us relatives' names. And so then we start Googling the relatives' names off of obituaries. And so we get really creative, because we want to close your transaction. So we're going to do whatever we can as a third mutual party to assist you in trying to locate these people. Okay. Skeletons in the closet. We often require a statement of information, or what you know as an SI, to be completed by each seller and buyer. We currently have, and you'll learn a little bit more about it at the end of the class, but we currently have a information gathering portal that goes out to both buyers and sellers at the beginning of our transactions, that has been very, very successful in collecting enough information to clear a statement of information requirement early on in our transactions. So it's been very successful. So we are rarely having to figure out these SI issues at the 11th hour. But it asks for information about the parties, such as social security number, residence history, marital history, job history, aliases, etc. It asks about if you have children, if so, what are their names, dates of birth, and so on and so forth. And if it's generally a general good idea to have your clients understand that we are not going to sell their information. We're here, we collect information, and we are required, it's our fiduciary duty, we are required to keep their information private and secure. We're only collecting so we can eliminate possible liens that may or may not be theirs, or address liens that are there, and be able to move forward. So it's super important, and we use all that information. We run their social, we run their names, and we compare it on we have the general index, and of course everything that affects the property. This has to be done, whether your client thinks or says that they don't have anything. It just has to be done. We cannot close the file with any unresolved liens against the seller and or a buyer. Buyers, the situation has changed recently, or I guess not so recent anymore, but where there's only a few things that the buyer is affected by, but I will review that after we go through the seller. Sellers, it's basically a big cleanup process for the seller. We have to address federal tax liens, bankruptcies, most judgments, depending, when it says most judgments, some judgments can be out by time. If the creditor hasn't re-recorded something after a 10-year span, we can state that judgment is out by time and we do not have to address it. Child support and note spouses or other parties added to title bring all their stuff into title. So if you have a client that said, oh, I added my cousin because I needed, whatever, for whatever reason, guess what? Cousin stuff affects the property now, even though he was not even part of the original purchase. People have great ideas, taking people off, adding people, it outside of title, it's nothing but problems. But that's what we're here for, to clean up these problems. In regards to buyers, statement of information, the two items that we address is federal tax liens and bankruptcy. However, we do our best, and I think we do a pretty good job of advising buyers if something does come up or we see something in the transaction along the lines of abstract judgments or child support that are affecting the buyers. And, because we get it a lot now where buyers is like, buyers are now sellers after they bought the property 2 years ago, and now they're selling, and they tell us, oh, I didn't have to deal with that child support when I bought the property, or I didn't have to deal with the abstract judgment when I bought the property. Yeah, exactly, you're right. You didn't, but now you do, because you're relinquishing an asset. So we try to do our best, like I said, and I think we do a pretty good job of advising buyers when things do pop up in the transaction when they're buying. We just like to let them know, just take note that if you ever do decide to sell, or, this is very important, or refinance, you will have to address this abstract judgment or this child support, and so on and so forth. So even though buyers do not have to address those liens, they do become an issue when they sell. Okay. Ghostbusters, satisfying or removing federal and state tax liens. I have 2 files right now that I'm dealing with the federal government, the IRS. And guess what? It takes quite a bit of time to obtain those payoff demands from the IRS. 2 different scenarios. I have a file where I have to request 3 IRS liens for this lady that they've been filed against her and her husband. Her husband has passed away, and now she's having to deal with this, but we are requesting all 3 liens, and there's a process. She has to come in. She came in, filled out the 8821, so we can have authorization to get that information from the IRS. And so once we get the demands, which they could take up to 45 days if they like. And so of course that's on top of your normal escrow period. And so that seems to be well on its way. I have another transaction that I just picked up where they have a huge IRS tax lien, and we are submitting a package to the IRS to allow them to sell the property and collect just whatever's available of proceeds to pay the IRS tax liens. And after they pay, I mean, I don't even have a demand yet. I don't even have an approval, but should the IRS approve the package and tell us, okay, we'll take X amount of dollars, the sellers will still remain with at least $80,000 of a tax lien that is unsatisfied. But what our package is asking the IRS to do is, it's a form of a short sale, but it's really not a short sale because we're not dealing with the payoff lender. But we're asking the IRS to say, hey, we'll give you this much money if you just do a partial release of your lien to release this property. And a lot of the times the IRS will do it because they're like, okay, at least we'll get something. And so that doesn't release the lien entirely. It still follows those sellers, and for whatever they do, for the rest of their lives until they get it resolved or paid off in full. But that alone, again, is a process because we have to submit so much paperwork. So I thought I'd mention that to you. So we do order the payoff and the seller to pay for at closing. Escrow holds off on ordering payoffs in these scenarios that I spoke to you about, because the seller can contact the tax authority or whoever, even if it's an abstract judgment. It doesn't always have to just be a tax authority. We give them the opportunity to contact the creditor to negotiate a lower amount, because the moment that we ask for a payoff that creditor is gonna be like, oh, I want all my money. I'm gonna get all my money, and they submit the demand, and they know that once we are in receipt of that demand, we have again a fiduciary duty to act upon that demand. So we give the seller an opportunity. Would you like to contact this creditor or the IRS or the state franchise tax board and perhaps negotiate a lower amount? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. If they are successful, at that point in time, they tell them, as soon as they get that letter saying, okay, we're agreeing to a lower amount, they contact our office, and then they have to get that letter in writing, because if they don't, then the negotiation was all for nothing. Then our office reaches out to that entity and requests a demand, and then that entity will give us the negotiated amount. Okay. So it's a little bit of an intricate process, but it works, and I've had a lot of successful closings where there is these monstrous liens. So, okay. We stop. Okay, option for buyers. Escrow, same thing, to hold off, escrow to order the payoff and buyer to pay at closing. We have, it's basically the federal tax liens, because that's the only thing that we have to address for buyers. And then we have to, for bankruptcies for buyers, we have to get authorization for our transaction from the bankruptcy court. So those are the two areas that we do have to walk down the path of getting, either demands from the IRS or court order authorizing the buyer, if they had a bankruptcy still open, to purchase the property. Okay. Bankruptcies. Bankruptcies can cause potential title issues. Well, not unusual. Bankruptcies are not standard. I don't see these often, but when I do, all open bankruptcies require the debtor to get permission from the court to sell or encumber an asset, the home, or to take on new debt. Chapter 7 and 13 bankruptcies against the seller are the most common we will find in a sale situation. So, in regards to a seller or a buyer, if we do not, in order for us not to require the bankruptcy's court authorization, the bankruptcy must be closed and show that it's closed. And otherwise, we do need authorization. Okay. A letter from the bankruptcy trustee or court order will be required to close escrow. The trustees will sometimes require that a payment be made to the court at close. And so when we do get those court authorizations, they do oftentimes come with a request for an amount to be paid. Notice of pending action. This is also known as les pendens. These are court actions that have been placed by individuals. This is often a true slayer of your transaction. This means that someone has a lawsuit pending that may affect the title to the property. It could be anybody. We often find these in acrimonious divorce or probate situations. A demand, the aggressing party usually wants money before releasing and withdrawal. A withdrawal of les pendens is a legal document that must, and I say must, be recorded to release the les pendens, and then will be required before closing. So we've had withdrawals issued to us without recording, because we can record them in our transaction. So, and actually, to be honest with you, we prefer that we record the withdrawal ourselves along with the transaction, so we don't have any additional delays. Other liens, judgments, or court orders. These are not a standard item. We do see them, but they're not standard. The most common type to show on the preliminary title report is support judgments. So like child support and so on and so forth. For child support, If there's an arrears, we have to pay those current. But if your client is current, we have to request a matured installment from the Department of Child Support Services stating that our client has their payments are current and there's nothing outstanding. These are issued by the courts when child support, spousal support is owed by the party named see statement of information. Any order judgment is a red flag. Support judgments can take up to 6 weeks to get demands and a release from the creditor. Usually the district attorney's office will issue those. If you see an order or judgment, contact escrow immediately to verify that the demand has been ordered. I had a client that I've had an escrow with quite some time. There's other issues going on. But they actually contacted me to let me know that they got a letter from the state of California Franchise Tax Board that their a lien has been filed against them. When it's filed, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's recorded, but you have to understand that even though it's not recorded, we're on notice. We know about it. We can't just pretend that we don't know about it, even though it's not recorded. So when we have knowledge of a lien, whether it's recorded or not, we have to act upon it. Okay.
And Anna, how about the date down that we do the day of closing? And I know that has some surprises and things like that, but people need to get an understanding that there's no other way that we could have found those until that date down.
Okay, so that's kind of, we have to do a date down for every transaction. And because our preliminary title report is issued on a certain date, and that date reflects the oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. The date on the preliminary title report is not the date that we are like issuing the preliminary title report. It's where we have checked all of the recordings, all the records of that particular property and what has affected it. And so once we get to closing, and it may be 30 to 45 days from the time that the original title report where the prelim was report issued, something could have happened. So we do a date down, meaning we make sure that we've checked from the time that we issued the prelim to the date that we're recording, that nothing has gone on record, that no liens or creditors have placed a lien on either the property or the owner, or for that matter, even the buyer, because we do a date down on names and the property. So if it's clean and clear, we're good, smooth sailing. But if something comes up, that can stop us in our tracks. Can't kill us, but it can stop us in our tracks. We just have to make sure that we get the information, get the demand in, rectify it, make sure that the parties that it's against are okay, that we actually, pay it in escrow and move forward. Now, I mentioned earlier that if we have knowledge, or we've been put on notice, or we know about something that has not been recorded or just recently got recorded, because when we date something down, we are 2 weeks, there's a 2-week gap, approximately a 2-week gap on the plant date. That's what I was trying to get out earlier, just a few seconds ago. Plant date, that's what I was looking for. And a plant date is basically, the plant is all the records on that particular property. And so there is a little time frame. So if somebody goes and records something yesterday, it's not going to be on my plant date today. So there is, that time frame. However, I have actually had more than once when somebody has found out, and of course we keep everything confidential, but maybe word of mouth, or somebody was talking to somebody at the grocery store, or whatever the case may be, because Fresno's a small town. Somebody had found out that an individual had an escrow going where they were selling a piece of property, and they actually owed somebody money and refused to pay them. Well, that person ran down to the recorder's office and recorded an abstract judgment against my seller, and had enough knowledge to know that there was no way I was going to know about it through the plant, after it got recorded, came and showed up at our lobby and said, I understand that you have an escrow on 12345 Smith Street. I have a judgment, it's on record, and hands it to our receptionist, and our receptionist walked back, handed it to me, and I literally was almost minutes away from releasing our recording, and it screeched, halt, stopped everything, because I've had knowledge. So, you know, that's unusual because most people don't have enough knowledge to go ahead and do something like that, but it happens. And guess what? I had to call the seller, let the seller know, or call the agent and call the seller, let them know what just happened. And the seller was upset and said, no, you have to close, you have to close. And I said, I can't, I'm sorry, we have to address this, because he actually did not want to pay him. And I said, well, there's nothing I can do. If you don't want to address this and you don't want to pay him, we can't close. So there was quite a bit of people upset, because of course the buyer was excited, the lender had funded. We thought the selling agent thought they were going to hand keys over that afternoon to the buyers. So it was pretty intense. Long story short, we ended up closing the following day. I think the seller had a change of heart overnight and told me, you know, said that he agreed on paying it. I got an official demand from the person that walked into my office. And, you know, so it does have, nightmares do happen, but at the end of the day, we can fix it.
So Anna, we did have one question. What if something comes up on title after closing? So how would that relate to that plant date issue on whether it was a claim covered by their title insurance or not?
Well, yeah, it all depends. It has to be investigated, and our claims department will investigate it to see on the legitimacy of it. If notice was done correctly. And yes, so we'd be working with who the lien was against, whether it was the buyer or the seller, in regards to getting that satisfied. If it was a seller, of course, the buyer is not going to be affected in any way. They have a title policy to protect them. But we would be working directly with the seller to get that rectified, along with our claims department.
Thank you. And we just have a few minutes left, but we cannot do this presentation without talking about wire fraud.
Yes. It's our friend that's never going to go away, ever. You just have to be vigilant and just the one thing that I do need to just continue to remind agents is, please don't ask your escrow units to email you the wire instructions to provide, so you can provide them to your buyers. It's just asking for trouble. These fraudsters are literally sitting and watching every move that everybody's making in regards to in our industry. Because what happens is, if we send that, you know, whether it's us or another escrow company, when they send that to you in a secure email and you forward it, that secure link is broken. And so your buyer will be getting a email from who they think that is you, and it's really the fraudster, you know, impersonating that, and they've changed the account number, and it looks so good, it looks so legitimate. So if you don't walk away with anything, at least walk away today saying, I'm not going to ask, as an agent, the escrow unit to send me the wire instructions so I can forward it to my buyer. Now, having said that, you can ask your escrow units, when you send my buyer wire instructions in a secure email, can you please CC me? So you know that your buyer already received those wire instructions. So that's one thing that you can do to stay on top of it, but to know that you're not involved in helping these fraudsters obtain, or helping the fraudsters having your buyers wire to their account instead of ours. If it used to be where if we found out there was a fraudulent wire, you know, that was sent, it used to be that we had 24 hours. We no longer have 24 hours. We're lucky if we have 2. But if we find that we catch it in time, we find out, we have a fraud department that works very closely with the FBI. And, they've been successful in catching some of these fraudsters, these criminals. But our time frame is very short. And once these buyers and sellers have this misconception that if this happens, that their money is protected, that it's not. Like, we as an entitled insurance company, we're not going to give them the money that was stolen by the fraudsters. Their money is not protected. So it's you just stay on top of it. Just read your emails carefully. We do have a class that we did in the past, and I think we have that information, how to identify a fraudulent email. Just pay close attention to emails that are coming and going. And I know that you want to make things easier for your clients and helping, distribute information, but it's just best that they have direct communication with the title and escrow company. Okay. So these are the type of targets that the fraudsters do go after, because they sit and watch emails go back and forth. And so they kind of get an idea of when the transaction is going to close, so they know when to hit for seller's proceeds. They see that, oh, congratulations, we accepted your offer. So then they have an idea that within the next 3 days, a buyer's EMD is going to go in, whether it's a little amount, it all adds up for them. They also know, when the buyer's closing funds are supposed to be going to the title company. So they time these things right. They sit and they watch these emails go back and forth, and they know when to hit. The funding loan is rare, but it does happen. Payoff loan funds, we have policies in place and procedures in place that we are required to do. So we make sure that the payoff funds get to the payoff lender securely. And commissions. This is huge right now. Huge, because a lot of agents are now wanting their commissions wired, and so they are a victim of these emails being sent on these fraudsters putting their account numbers in lieu of the agents. So that one is the newest and the biggest right now, because of the change in issuing a check versus a wire. Okay. Emails or other communications attempting to change wire or disbursement instructions, especially when end of the business day, weekly, monthly, prior to holiday weekend. Big time. Friday mornings into Friday early afternoons, especially if Monday is a holiday. People are escrow units are under pressure to get all this money out, because agents want their commissions, sellers want their closing funds, mortgage brokers want their broker fees. So we find that this is happening basically on Fridays before a major holiday on that Monday. So we are actually that especially we take our time. Oftentimes agents, sellers, they do get upset with us because we're calling to verify wire instructions and we get a voicemail, and we're not going to send that wire out. And by the time we get a call back to verify wire instructions, the wire cutoff has come and gone, and we get upset clients and sellers and agents saying, I wanted my money and now I can't get it until Tuesday. And my only answer to them is I'm terribly sorry, and I understand the frustration, but I'd rather you get your money on Tuesday than not at all. So I know it happens, and it's happened to me, and it's happened to other my fellow units here. But we have to call and verify those wire instructions, and sometimes it's just not done in a timely manner to where you guys, the client calls us back. So like I said, I'd rather you get your money on Tuesday than not at all. There you go. Nightmares we can't control. Non-performance on the party of any party, the seller, buyer, the realtors, or lender. Things happen and we just can't control. We are a third mutual party we act upon instruction. If we do not have instruction, we're stopped in our tracks. Like we can't move forward. So we have our rules and regulations, policies and procedures. We are here to keep everybody safe. And if we don't have what we need to move forward, and it's out of our control, that's our nightmare. And then cancellations after a contingency period. The only thing I need to remind everybody is, yes, whether the deposit is going to the seller or the buyer, whatever the contract states, I just want to remind everybody that escrow needs mutually signed cancellation or a similar instruction if the deposit is to go to the seller or is to go to the buyer. If I don't, or not just me particularly, but if escrow doesn't have that, we can't just arbitrarily just issue the deposit or whatever funds to back to the buyer or to the seller. We have to have mutual signed instructions. Okay. Repairs that are not made, unexpected damages to the property. I do want to circle around the repairs that are not made. Those are out of our control. We don't know what the property needs or doesn't need. If you are communicating with us, if there's a request for repairs, oftentimes we don't get that. So we don't know what's happening, and that's not our form. But if there's a credit that's on there, I hope you're sharing that with your escrow unit. And so there's unexpected damages to the property. Just recently we had that windstorm and trees fell on houses and fences were down, and it did cause some problems, but escrow wasn't told, and we don't inspect properties. We don't know if there was damage, and we're just moving on our merry little way, and we've had to where we've closed and something happened to that property, that the eve of closing. If you don't talk to your escrow units, they don't know. Okay. I touched on this at the very beginning. It's your buyers and sellers are going to get our Start in Here digital opening packages. It's been very successful. It's super easy, but our staff is equipped now. If your buyers and sellers are having some difficulty, encourage them to contact their escrow unit and we can walk them through it. It's fast, easy, and it saves a lot of time. And they actually can, we may have a slide for this, but they can make their earnest money deposit in this portal. And it has saved people trips. The only thing is they have to completely fill out their check. Sign, date, has to be correct as if we had a physical check. Okay. And for you agents, if you don't know about our In Here portal, you're missing out. The train is leaving. You better jump on it. It's a way for you to keep track of your transactions with Chicago Title. It doesn't have to be a escrow unit specific. If you have a transaction with Chicago Title, or if you have many transactions with Chicago Title, you will be able to keep track of all of your Chicago Title transactions in the In Here portal. Not only can you keep track of them, you'll be getting some push notifications real time as things are happening within your transaction. And then also, you will be able to access documents that escrow has, anywhere from the EMD receipt to the preliminary title report, to buyer seller statements, to page 16 NHD. And guess what? At the closing, you'll be able to have access to your broker closing package. So if you don't know about this, please call your sales representative and find out all the buzz.
Anna, thank you so much. And we did have a couple more questions just to finish this out. I know we are past our time, so we understand if you guys have to jump off and get on with your Friday. And I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for coming on to our class today, but we will take the time to answer those questions as well. The first one is from Wanda, or from Kristen. Since this is so prevalent, how do we ensure that clients get their money back? What safety measures are being put in place to ensure that they get their money back? What new measures or laws protect title, escrow, and clients? Safety software being developed. And I do understand that that is what our secure transactions and portals and everything that we're putting in place is to affect. But have you heard of any other measures being put into place other than just paying attention?
Unfortunately, no. That's the only measure that we have, because you can't get, once money's gone, that's why that time frame is so short now. It's like a 2-hour window. The only time I've heard that somebody got their money back is they caught it in time. They reported it to the fraud department. The fraud department contacted the FBI. It was within 2 hours, and they literally caught the fraudster at the bank trying to withdraw the money. That is, if it's caught in time, that's the only way your client will be able to get it back. So the only thing is pay attention, because there's nothing. I mean, cyber crimes is just so much of it that it's just hard to get your thumb on it, and it's hard to just pay attention. And just follow the practices of having the sellers and buyers communicate directly with the escrow unit. No middleman, no back and forth. You as an agent can be CC'd on everything, but it's just best because we have a secure portal, and that's just the best way. And
So
if you
that-
have a
that takes
client,
in-
if you have a client that does not use email or cannot, or just technology is just not their thing, we go back to the good old fashioned faxing and good old fashioned come into our office. Let's talk. Let's fill this information out. Let's be face to face, because we still do that. I have 2 or 3 clients right now that we fax and they come in because they just don't do technology.
And so just another part of this was they were asking if they send clients any emails from escrow or don't. And our general rule is we would appreciate if you do not ever forward an email from us containing any sensitive information. We will communicate securely with the clients and copy you in. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. If there is a extensive conversation to be had with the client, it's best just to have it directly with the client and for agents and TCs to be CC'd so everybody is aware. It's just a good rule of thumb, and yeah, that is basically it.
And then our last question, we have a situation where the child support is between 2 counties. The amount has been negotiated to a set lower amount. What do you recommend the parties do to expedite the process?
I recommend that the escrow unit immediately send out the demand to the child support. And once that child support demand has been sent out, ask them to notify the individual that the child support is against. That individual can contact, because child support has to receive our demand, because they won't do anything without it. But then once the demand has been sent, the person that it's against can go or call to the child support department and ask them to expedite the process. And so once that's done, they have been known to put that request up towards the top, because they just work as they receive. And so that person can call, and it does work, and I've had success with that.
Fantastic.
Jennifer, before you end, I just wanted to say one thing, and that's everybody that signed under Wanda, because she forwarded you the link, you will not get the email. She will. So you'll need to reach out to Wanda if you want a copy of the class.
Or you can reach directly to your sales exec,
Yeah,
and we'll add you to the list.
I'll get it to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys again. Thank you, Anna, for a tremendous job of helping people negotiate these transaction nightmares. I hope you guys learned some tips and tricks. We live to close escrows for you, just like you live to help your clients and help them get their transactions closed. So thanks for working with us. Have a great day, and watch out for those black cats and other Friday the 13th superstitions. Take care.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.